Hello, I am Karim, and I am thankful for the opportunity to be able to offer this presentation about navigating the journey of grief. Thank you to my dear friend Yanni Davis for this opportunity, and let's dig in. Navigating the journey. Again, I am Karim. I am a griever, I am a grief supporter, and I am a certified grief coach. As you see the word griever, I have no shame, no shame, I guess, in admitting that I am currently in a season of grief. I am a grief supporter in that I assist people along the way when it comes to memorial service preparation, operating as a liaison between family members and taking care of other affairs. And I am a certified grief coach. So for those who are in spaces of grief, I have the honor and the opportunity to be able to journey with you, whether that is individually or in groups, to help them navigate that journey. In navigating the grief journey, the purpose is to empower you with information and practical tools that will help you navigate this journey well. First way that we go about doing that is acknowledging what we grieve. Acknowledge what you grieve. The first acknowledgement, or the first thing that we grieve, is loss. And loss by way of a person or people, loss in the form of possessions such as homes, cars, think hurricanes, fires, or even if it happens because of a repossession or, those types of things, that is still a loss. The loss of pets and the loss of possibilities, that idea, that dream, that thing that you wanted to happen that just never took place. Acknowledge what we grieve, change. And this is especially relevant within these last 14 and a half, almost 2 years. So it's a little bit more than 14 and a half months. January will be 2 years that we have been in this space of the pandemic. And that is a major change. And that has also been a major source, if you will, of grief, because we haven't been able to be around our friends and family members the way we would like to. We have to be masked up all the time. A lot of the privileges, a lot of the opportunities that we had because of this led to such change, and that is something that we also grieve. We grieve changes in our health, changes in our finances, changes in location. So if a person or people have to move from what has always been home for them for whatever reason, if a person has to maybe move their job, they were used to working in a certain place, and now because the company has changed, they have to move, where they are working. That change in location can lead to grief, as well as change in relationships, whether those are friendships, romantic relationships, business relationships. Those types of changes, especially if they are abrupt, can lead to grief. We have to acknowledge that we grieve. Do not ignore or avoid what you feel. Do not ignore or avoid what you feel. Your feelings are valid. Your feelings are right. Your feelings are true to you in that moment and in that experience. And so there's no one that should be telling you to ignore it or to avoid it or that it's wrong. How you feel is how you feel, and it's not something that should be ignored or avoided. When you are in space to be able to release or express that feeling, by all means do so, which is actually something that will come up a little bit later, but I'll stay here for now and say to you, do not ignore or avoid what you feel. Because if you do, you're going to find that those feelings build up and build up. Those emotions and feelings build up and build up to the point that you find yourself snappy or short or impatient because those feelings and those emotions were avoided in the beginning. And now now it's like the top is about to blow off. So do not ignore or avoid your feelings. Lean into them. Lean into what has triggered the feelings, who has triggered the feelings, when they were triggered, how, and even where, right? That's important to be able to lean into it so that when they come up again, or when you're in that familiar space or around that familiar person or in that particular experience, you already have an awareness that what you felt before, you may feel again. Hope that makes sense. So we have to acknowledge that we grieve. And I'll say this before I go to the next slide. A lot of times we don't like doing that. We don't like acknowledging that we are grieving or that we are hurting or that we are in an emotional space. And while that is understandable, because when you are in those spaces, it is a space of vulnerability. It also takes courage to be able to acknowledge that you are in that space. The one thing that you don't want to do is to continue to avoid it, continue to ignore it, not lean into it, not have some sort of knowledge about it, because then you'll find yourself in a space of isolation. And isolation is one of the worst things that you can do when you're navigating the grief journey, because it's almost as if you'll begin to feel like the walls are closing in on you. And in a few slides from now, I'll also talk about being supported. And so I'll leave this where it is for the moment. Navigating the journey, again, we have to acknowledge that we grieve. In acknowledging that we grieve, we have to also realize that not all feelings of grief are low feelings. Not all feelings of grief are low feelings. And that may sound like an oxymoron, right? Like, it's grief. What do you mean there aren't all low feelings in grief? So I would like for you to take a moment and name some low feelings. So to give you an example, the obvious example would be sadness. What are some other low feelings that can come with grief? So there may be anger, there may be disappointment or guilt, there may be loneliness, which are low feelings, but there are also some high feelings that come along with grief. And you may be saying, ma'am, we have no idea what you're talking about. That's good, because I'm here to tell you about what it is. So an example of a high feeling of grief would be joy. If you happen to have a memory or be in a space where you last were with that person or that possession or whatever that was, and you have this sense of joy, that is a high feeling versus a low feeling of sadness. So what are some high feelings? So there is joy, there is happiness, there is just, and I don't know, sometimes we say that we feel light or we feel refreshed. You can even have moments of feeling refreshed, a high moment or a high feeling of feeling refreshed or being refreshed in your space of grief. In navigating the journey, you have to acknowledge that grief is a journey and not a destination. It is a journey and not a destination. It is a journey and not a destination. That means that you cannot Google Maps or whatever the GPS system you use. You can't use a GPS system to get through grief. There is no space where you arrive and you are there. And I say that to say this. It's not as if you are going to cry about it today and then wake up tomorrow and it's done. That's not how it works. It is a journey, and you may find that as you are along that journey, you are no longer grieving one thing or one person, but as you continue along the journey, you find that you may begin to grieve something else, or that you haven't completely grieved what was before. So it is not a destination, but it is a journey, and it is your journey and not anyone else's. It is your journey and your journey alone. And because of that, that means that everybody will grieve differently. So grief is a journey that is different for everyone. It is your journey. And what I mean by that is you can have, and I'll just use, for example, my sister and I. My sister and I were raised in the same home, and we experienced the physical transition of our mother. But we experienced that and are experiencing that in two different ways. And so with that, there should never, don't allow people to tell you how you should grieve. Could be the same two people in the same two positions, the same two people who lost who experienced the loss or change of the same position or possession or person, whatever that looks like. But because you have two different people who experience the same loss or change, because they are two different people, they're going to grieve differently. And so that means that I should not tell my sister how to do it, and she should not tell me how to do it, because the journey is our own. Give ourselves permission to feel what we feel. Again, what you feel is what you feel. How you feel is how you feel. Your feelings are right. Your feelings are your own. And as long as you are not intentionally harming yourself, other people, pets, or possessions, then what you feel is correct. What you feel is okay. And it goes right into the second point of expressing what you feel, which goes back to do not ignore or avoid what you feel. When you allow yourself the permission to express those feelings, to release those feelings, then that allows you to move further along the journey. That allows you to release some of the weight of grief. That allows you to not always be in those low feelings, but to allow yourself to get to the place of having some high feelings of grief. And so that grief expression or release may not always be that you cry. Maybe it's that you're writing something, or maybe you go for a walk, or maybe you sit in silence, or maybe you laugh, right? Maybe you laugh. And I think it's going to come up in another slide, but I'm going to say it here. I can remember like it was today, actually, not even yesterday. I can see the moment as if it is happening right now. When my mother was diagnosed, we received the age and stage of her cancer diagnosis, and the doctor walked in. My mother was sitting on the exam table. I was kind of sitting where I am now. My sister was sitting to the right of me. The doctor came in and gave my mother the news, and I started laughing. I did. I wasn't laughing because it was funny. I was laughing because that was the only way I knew to respond. And the irony is, it was almost like I was having this inner outer body moment, because I could hear myself laughing. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I'm talking to myself as this is happening. Like, Ray, stop laughing. Why are you laughing? Stop laughing. My sister turned and looked at me. My mother was crying. My mother looked at me. The doctor looked at me. His PA looked at me. And I kind of was like looking away or not looking at them, because I felt bad. Like, why are you? But that was my expression at that moment. That was the release at that moment. It was laughter, but not in a joking way. It was just the only way the only way I knew to release and express what I was feeling in that moment after having received that news. And later on, when my mother and sister and I were together, and it may have been as we were leaving, I said to them, I said, I am so sorry. I apologize for laughing. I wasn't laughing because I thought it was funny. It was just the only thing it was like the only thing my mind and my emotions knew to do. And they understood that. They knew that I wasn't laughing as a joke. But my sister did laugh and say to us that she was the only sane person in the room, because my mother was, as she should have been, crying, and I was laughing. And so my sister, she was like, I was the only sane person in the room. She said, and at one point we all looked at you. I said, I know. And it was very odd, but at the same time, it was what I was able to do to express that. And so then we also have to give ourselves permission to identify what we feel. So when we find ourselves, with these feelings, when they come up, identify it. I am feeling joy because I am feeling sadness because. For me, I laughed. I had to identify that I laughed. It was almost kind of that laugh to keep from crying, but I never felt the emotion of tears. The only thing I felt was to laugh. So I had to identify that I was laughing because that was my response, right? Identify what you feel. Some people feel angry, have anger in those moments of grief. I am angry because this person is not here. I am angry because I lost this possession. I am angry because there's been this change. Think about it. Think about what's happening as far as the pandemic is concerned. There are people who are angered by again, the fact that we have to socially distance, that we can't meet the way we usually meet because we have to wear masks, or even because of the vaccine, or having to be tested. And that's grief. And again, as long as there is no harm to you, other people, possessions, or pets, then what you feel is okay. In navigating the journey, we have to give ourselves permission to be supported. There was a slide a couple of slides ago. I talked about the fact that if you ignore and avoid what you feel, you will find yourself in a space of isolation. You'll feel like the walls are closing in on you. But give yourself permission to be supported as you grieve. And I know that we are still not in spaces where we are like gathering the way we normally would. But if you have a person who can be in your space, who you trust to allow to see you in such a vulnerable space, let them. If you have somebody that says, hey, I want to come get you and take you to dinner, or let's go for a walk, or just to check in and see how you're doing, allow yourself to be supported. I know that grief is a vulnerable space, but when you allow yourself to be supported, it reminds you that you are not alone. You may be lonely, but you are not alone. When you give yourself permission to not stay stuck, and that again goes with feeling what you feel, expressing what you feel, identifying what you feel, and allowing yourself to be supported. Because there are times where we find ourselves just in this one spot. And I'll never forget this. I remember my sister said to me that you can be moving and going nowhere. And the analogy that she used is with soldiers. They march in place, but they are going nowhere. So give yourself permission to not stay stuck. And the best way to not stay stuck is to be supported. Allow yourself to be supported. Allow yourself to feel what you feel, express it, identify it, which has you to continually move forward on the journey. Give yourself permission to find the good in grief. And again, that might sound like an oxymoron as well, but there is good in grief. It may not be in that initial shock of the loss or the change. It may not be while you're taking care of business after the loss and the change, but the good in grief is the memories that you had, those good times that you had, and even what it is that you find yourself better able to do even in the midst of the grief. So for us, for my sister and I, when it came to my mom, the good, even in the fact that we were grieving this diagnosis, right? This major change in my mom's health and in her life, the good that we found it is that every time she had an appointment, we went to this place called La Hacienda for margaritas. we would get chips, salsa, and margaritas because my mother loved margaritas. And so that was the good that we were able to find. You can find that you create moments and memories and experiences even within your grief. In navigating the journey, you have to remember that you've never taken this journey before. You've never taken this journey before. And I laugh because the next set of words were actually what I see here, which says to be gracious with and kind to yourself. You've never done this before. So don't be upset with yourself when you find that you feel that you are angry or that you are hurt. Don't be upset with yourself when you find that you have joy or that you are sad or that you don't want to be bothered with people. Be kind to yourself. Be gracious with yourself because you've never taken this journey before. And then that leads right into the next point, that there is no shame. There is no regret. There is no self-judgment or criticism along this journey. It is your experience. They are your moments and your memories. And as long as, again, you are not harming yourself, other people, possessions, or pets, then there is no shame. There is no regret. You are allowed to feel what you feel for as long as you feel it, as long as it does not become complicated or compacted. As long as what you are feeling is not, and the expression of those feelings is not causing you to kind of be debilitated, if I can say it that way, then what you feel and how you feel and the way you express it is absolutely okay. Remember that this journey takes time, friends. It is not a sprint. I don't even know if I want to say it's a marathon. Again, I go back to the example that I used earlier. If you cry today, it does not mean you're going to wake up tomorrow and you're no longer grieving, right? It takes time. Be gracious with yourself, be kind to yourself, and remember that it takes time. And also remember that every grief expression is a step further forward. Again, that keeps you from staying stuck, that keeps you moving, that keeps you going along the journey. So every grief expression, which is the release or expression of grief, acknowledging those feelings, acknowledging what you're grieving and that you're grieving, allowing yourself to be supported, giving yourself permission to be supported, to feel what you feel, and to not do it alone, allows you to move further forward on the journey. And then finally, this journey, even though it can be challenging, it's not as hard as we think when we don't fight it. You don't have to fight grief. You don't have to fight with grief. It's gonna happen, right? It happens to all of us. There is no person on earth, except for maybe babies, who have not experienced grief. And who knows, what if babies experience grief once they're out of the womb? That's something to think about, huh? Like they're literally out in the world like, wow, what if the reason why babies cry when they're born is because they're grieving? I know it may seem far-fetched, but I'm going to do some research on it. The other thing about it is that humans are not the only ones that grieve. Animals grieve too. And so if they do it, they don't have any shame or regret. They allow themselves to be supported. We should take a cue from them and allow ourselves to do the same thing. You don't have to do it alone. Lens right into the next point. You do not have to go about this journey alone. You can have people to support you, to walk with you, to be there for you when you need that. And then the grief journey reveals to us a different side of ourselves. It reveals to us that side of ourselves that we don't always like to get in touch with, which is our emotions. And sometimes it comes very abruptly, and sometimes it's very hard, but it's not as hard as we think. It is challenging and it can be hard, but it's not as hard as we think. It's almost like you know how for people who don't mind water, who don't mind being in pools or in the sea, the best way to float is to relax, right? And so that's what I mean when I say it's not as hard as you think. You just got to allow yourself to relax in this thing and allow grief, allow the process, allow the journey to reveal another side of you. That's that side of you that needs nurturing, that side of you that needs that self-care, that we busy ourselves and don't give into it, that we overcompensate with ourselves and don't give into it. And so sometimes grief will reveal to us that different side. Finally, my tagline is grieve well so that you can be well. Grieve well so that you can be well. And if you need assistance in doing that, if you want to talk more about how you can grieve well, don't hesitate to reach out. My name and my email address is there. And I would be more than happy and honored to be able to have a coaching session with you, a discovery call, or even to be a grief supporter along the way, should that time arise. Thank you again so very much for this opportunity, and have an amazing and incredible day.